You're listening to Girls with Grafts, a burn community podcast created by Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, a leading nonprofit dedicated to supporting the burn community. In this podcast, we'll talk with burn survivors, share resources to help with supporting and improving burn recovery, and discuss how to prevent burn injuries. Here are your hosts, burn survivors and Phoenix Society's marketing team, Amber Wilcox and Rachel Kudlak.
Hello and welcome back to Girls with Grafts. I'm Rachel Kudlak, one of your hosts, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Amber Wilcox.
Hi there. How's everyone doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for our bonus episode today.
I know, I am too. And I think it's definitely an important episode that will spread some additional awareness as well. So without further ado, so we're excited to release this episode in honor of the 20th anniversary of the Station Nightclub Fire, which is today. And so we've brought some special guests on to speak with us about that event and to kind of dive into it a little bit more. So Rachel, do you want to introduce today's guests?
Yes. And before I welcome our two guests today, I do want to give a special thank you to the National Fire Sprinkler Association. NFSA is a long-standing Phoenix partner, and for over a century, they've been advocating for a stronger industry and a safer world by promoting fire sprinklers in model codes and legislation. So advocacy is one of the topics we're going to dive in with our guests today. So I'm really excited to welcome Gina Russo to the podcast. She was born and raised in Cranston, Rhode Island, and she is a mother to two amazing sons and has worked at the local hospital for 32 years. In 2003, her and her fiance attended a concert at the Station Nightclub in West Warwick, Rhode Island, that turned into a deadly blaze, killing 100 people, including her fiance, Alfred. Gina survived the accident with third and fourth degree burns to over 40% of her body, and she only learned about her fiance's death after coming out of a medically induced coma 12 weeks later. In 2009, she self-published a book titled From the Ashes. It was written for a therapeutic reason, but she wanted to share her story with others. And she's very proud to say and to share that the book went on to sell for over 3,500 copies and opened up a world for her of public speaking about living and surviving such a tragic event. Today, she is a Phoenix SOAR peer supporter and loves giving back and helping new survivors navigate their new life and get back to living. She has been married to her husband, Stephen, for 15 years and loves her life as a burn survivor and what it has opened up for her. She's grateful for the opportunity to meet so many amazing people and the community to help others. And along with Gina, we also have the CEO of Phoenix Society, Amy Acton. She is a returnee guest, and we're so happy to have both Gina and Amy on today's podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great to be here on this very important podcast.
Welcome, both of you. Well, I know that some details and background about the event. So the Station Nightclub Fire occurred on the evening of February 20th, 2003, which would be our 20th anniversary, or your 20th anniversary, Gina, in West Warwick, Rhode Island, where 100 people were killed and over 230 were injured. The blaze began when the band Jack Russell's Great White took the stage and set off 4 large fireworks. So Gina, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us back to that day. I'm a native of Rhode Island myself, and so I do very much remember that day, even 20 years ago. So do you want to tell us a little bit about heading to the concert and what took place that night, and maybe a little bit about what you remember?
Sure. So February 20th, a very cold, snowy, lots of snow that day. Fred and I, Fred, we called him Fred, love live music. And that Thursday night, he happened to be at my mom's house for dinner, and he wanted to go see a particular movie. Ended up, long story short, we missed the movie time, but Fred, being Fred, went online to see if there was any karaoke going on, any music anywhere. And the Station Nightclub popped up, and he said, "That's right, Great White's there tonight. Do you want to go?" And now this time it's about 10:15, 10:10. So at 10:20, we called the club to see if we could still buy tickets. And they said, sure, come on down. He didn't live far away from there. We got there about 10:30, 10:35, bought a drink, said hello to a couple of people at the bar, then walked right to the front of the stage. There was a gentleman, the local disc jockey. We called him Dr. Metal. His name is Mike Gonzalez. Him and Fred were talking about upcoming baseball season. Then it was time for Mike to introduce the band. And I can still see Jack Russell and the band coming through the fire exit door, taking the stage. Jack said a few words. And as soon as he went into his song, Desert Moon, the pyrotechnics just went up. And life changed really quick. Fred knew immediately something was wrong. He could see that the curtain that was hanging behind the drummer, there was a spark on it. And he kept saying, this is going to be bad. This is really bad. We put our drink at Jack Russell's feet and then took about 3 to 4 steps to a fire exit. And there was a bouncer there. We're screaming, there's a fire, open the door. And he was adamant that it was club policy, band only could go through that door. Everything's in seconds in my world, that's what I remember. And I remember Fred just saying, we can't stand here and argue with this guy. We've got to go. And he turned me around and we started to make our way towards the entrance, the only other entrance we knew of. And at some point, he put his hand on the middle of my back and pushed me and screamed, go. And he literally just shoved me. And I made it to that front door. When I tried to turn around to see where Fred was, it was just mass chaos. Glass was shattering. What I've called black rain over the years, the ceiling was melting and Fred was just not in my line of vision. And I just remember praying to God, let my kids forgive me for dying in this place. I hope they have a good life. And I remember going down and hitting the hardwood floors, my breath just getting shorter and shorter and like a stabbing pain in my throat. And I don't know, by the grace of God, by somebody, an incredible firefighter, I woke up 12 weeks later from a medically induced coma, and that was just a whole other world.
Yeah. So how was that recovery? You're recovering from a physical injury, but then you also have, the emotional recovery of not only, what burn survivors go through emotionally, but on top of also losing your fiance. So how was that? And maybe what helped you keep going?
Sure. It was horrible. I was, when I came out of the coma, I had a trach, and I remember trying to ask my family where Fred was. My children happened to be visiting that day, and they all pretended they couldn't read my lips. They would stutter. They would do all kinds of things. About a week after waking up, they removed the trach to see if I could breathe on my own. And I said to my sister, where is Fred? And she said, he's not here. And I said, well, okay, what hospital is he in? And then she said, no, he didn't make it, Gina. He never made it out of the club. I just remember going blank, a psychiatrist coming in and talking to me about survivor guilt, but I couldn't hear anything. I really didn't hear him. It was quite an adjustment. I knew I was burned. I could see the gauze and the wrapping, but I really had no idea it was to that extent, how bad it was. It was just, my God, this incredible man died, and I didn't even know it. Then there was a funeral. There was all this stuff. That probably was worse for me than the burn injuries, the lung injuries. It took a lot longer. It took a lot longer to comprehend that this incredible man was no longer walking this earth. Learning about the injuries, it sounds so ridiculous now when I think back on it. A nurse was changing my head wrapping, and my head was burned 4th degree. So I remember the nurse being in the room, and she's taking the dressing down, and then she's putting new medication on. And she said, don't worry about it. They can reconstruct your left ear. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I can hear you. And she said, oh, uh-oh. She ran out of the room, in come some doctors to explain that, yes, I could hear, but I had lost my outer ear. The dumbest thing, and I'm still upset about it, I cannot wear earrings, and I want to wear earrings. And so I remember thinking that, like, how ridiculous, like later on, how ridiculous. I'm so blessed to be alive, and I'm worried about earrings. Then they started to talk about all the other injuries, that my hair would never grow back. I'd be bald for the rest of my life. And my back has 3rd-degree burns, and my arms do. And so I've had lots of grafting. They started off with cadaver skin, but it didn't work. So then they started harvesting skin from my legs. And now I call that my quilt, because you can see the patchwork on my legs. But it's truly okay. It's okay. It's an adjustment, looking at yourself for the first time. And I didn't see myself until the beginning of June. So the fire happened in February, because I was just so afraid. And a couple of days before I was being discharged from the rehabilitation hospital, the therapist, everybody thought it was time. Like, I needed to see what I looked like. And someone brought in a mirror. Man, that was overwhelming. To see my head and the damage, and all I kept thinking was, how are my sons going to be afraid of me? How, are they going to not want their mommy to go anywhere with them? They were in elementary school. A lot of emotions, but over time and lots of patience on my family's part and on my children's, I slowly, very slowly learned that I could rise above it.
And that you definitely have, Gina. As someone who is in the community myself, you are a huge instrumental part of helping a lot of our survivors, not just survive, but thrive after their injury. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the injury happened, you lost Fred today. You're married, I think Rachel said, of 15 years. So you are definitely not only surviving, but thriving both personally, right? And with those around you. I'm sure time was a big factor, but what are some of those resources and things that helped you kind of along the way?
My very first World Burn Congress. So the fire was 2003. My very first one was in North Carolina, in 2004. And first, I remember walking in the door, and there was this older gentleman in the wheelchair, Tom Edge. Most of us know his name, or you've met him, or you've had the privilege to meet him. And I walked in that door, and my sister was with me. She was my caretaker, so she kind of came with me wherever I needed to go. And I must have looked like I was ready to bolt, because this gentleman wheels up to me and says, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I don't belong here. No way. Like, no way. These people are so much worse than I. Like, that's not even fair to them." And Tom just looked at me and said, "Don't you dare do that. I don't care if you've got an inch scar, full body. We don't care. Get in there." And he was my first moment of being at World Burn. Throughout my 2003, though, everybody kept talking about the Phoenix Society. And I was so injured, I couldn't get to Boston hospitals on the night they had like a SOAR meeting or a group meeting with burn survivors. I just was so injured. And it's about an hour and a half away from my home in Cranston, and driving to Boston at that hour is just not nice. But for a whole year, all I heard about was the Phoenix Society and this incredible place, and it's open to everybody. And so I was very fortunate. One of the local foundations sponsored me to go, and my sister. And that was my moment of, my God, first of all, I'm not alone. And obviously I knew there were other station survivors, but it was just amazing. And very slowly, like, life just started to feel okay again. I can't say enough about what the Phoenix Society meant for me, and what I always want to give back. The SOAR program is super important to me. I help with the Wednesday night chats when I can. Everybody should know that it exists, because it's truly life-saving, and you don't survive this alone. You just don't. You have to have the support. I was very blessed to have an incredible support system here at home, but also with the Phoenix Society.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I mean, I love that you did get connected, so quickly after your injury. I mean, a year later to go to your first Phoenix Rural Burn Congress is so powerful, especially early on. And I know one thing, we know from the survivors from the fire, but just in general, survivors can go on to develop PTSD after their injury. And I just kind of wanted to ask you about that and how it is going into buildings even today and going, big crowds of people and how that is for you today.
I will say that I've been very fortunate to not have experienced PTSD on a level that I've heard other people experience it. Going out into crowds, restaurants, 20 years later, first thing I do is look for the exits and the sprinkler systems. And if I don't see anything, it's not that important. It just isn't. I'm not staying there. I definitely go to concerts, and yes, there's crowds, but I'm so well aware of where everything is. Mm-hmm. It just, it's ingrained in me. It's ingrained in my children now. They're adults, but it's ingrained in them. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's important. I know we had Amy on here at the very beginning, and Amy and our friends at NFSA and NFPA all talk about, the sprinklers and making sure you know where the exits are. And until you're in it or until you've experienced something around it, I think it's not something that we do as like common nature. But I remember just after that episode, my husband and I went to a concert in an older theater here in Florida. And I remember looking around, like not seeing sprinklers, but knowing like I was right next to the exit door, but like the fear that you experience when you like, and I would have never done that had I not talked to Amy and, all of our partners about how important it is to like check the exits, make sure you know the way out and know, are there sprinklers? Cause I remember thinking like, I don't know. And I don't think I would have done that had I not had a chance to speak with Amy about that.
I look back at some of the bars and the clubs I've been in to listen to music here in Providence and in Cranston. I scare myself. Like, my God, I was in that building. I never crossed my mind. I was just going to go listen to some music. Boy, does that change really quick. It changed quick. But
so the Station Nightclub Fire was the fourth deadliest at a nightclub in U.S. history, and we now know that the numerous violations of existing codes contributed to the severity of the fire. Amy, you have done a lot of work in this area with some advocacy efforts and lessons that were learned from this tragedy. Would you mind speaking a little bit about kind of some of the work in this area that has been done or the work that has to be done?
Yeah, well, I think, unfortunately, it takes sometimes these massive disasters to inch forward in prevention, right? It's frustrating. We've known that fire sprinklers are saving property in commercial buildings for a long time, but the willingness to make change sometimes doesn't happen until something this tragic happens, which is very sad. And we saw it 10 years later with another group that we were able to connect the survivors in Rhode Island with the KISS survivors in Brazil. And the advocate voices here have made a difference. Gina and her friends like Rob and Joe have advocated for Tax Incentive Act through NFSA and NFPA and others, Home Fire Sprinkler Coalition, advocating for tax incentives so people can retrofit older buildings with fire sprinklers so they can have their patrons be safe, because no one ever expects this is going to happen to them until it does. And then it's life-altering and destructive. I think the unique thing that happened in Rhode Island, from my perspective, was that the community outpouring of support, they looked beyond just the immediate needs, and they looked at the long-term requirements of the survivors and what they would need. people like Dennis Murphy and Reverend John Holt were instrumental in helping. We kind of showed up one day. Several weeks later, they had a special place. I think it was a car lot, wasn't it? An old used car. So survivors and families could go there to find resources. And our board president at the time, Frank McGonigal, lived in Swansea, Mass, very close. And so we just went and we said, this is who we are. We think we can be helpful. Our community is here ready when you are. And they took us up on that. And Frank became a advisor to that committee who managed those funds. And that's why there was 18 survivors were able to come to World Burn within a year. And some even came within, I think it was 8 months to Cleveland, which is unheard of, right? To have that connection and resources to get people connected. So the advocacy happened on both sides. It happened on the prevention side later down the road. And I think it was the 15th anniversary, we celebrated the Tax Incentive Act. It took us 15 years to get that done. Right. And the voices of Rhode Island were instrumental, and the congressman there, to have that happen in our country. On the flip side, I think it also really shifted people's thinking about the long-term recovery. We were able to really bring in resources. We brought in financial resources from Susan Bradley, was an expert in sudden money, because there were litigation here, and we wanted to help people understand how that might impact them and prepare them for that, and the trauma that can trigger. So we tried some really unique things there. We did a mental health training for all of the mental health providers in Rhode Island. If you can imagine, Rhode Island's a small state. So I can't remember how many organizations showed up, but experts like Megan Bronson and Sam Price and Jim Bosch and myself helped them understand what burn recovery would look like so they could be supportive to the community long term. So it was a privilege and an honor to grow and learn with Rhode Island on how we could do it better. It formed great relationships with Spalding Healthcare, Spalding Rehab, and Mass General. I think they saw the value of peer support through that. So out of tragedy has come some really amazing things. And I want to shout out to Gina also for being a tireless advocate for a memorial. She and a handful of others were a dog with a bone on that one. And it's a beautiful remembrance. And I just think I know that was a lot of work, emotional and physical and not everything else. But
it really was.
And it's the Station Fire Memorial. Do I have?
Yep, Station. Right? We call it the Station Fire Memorial Park.
Right. Tell us a little bit more about that.
The day the fire happened and months afterwards, it became this just tragic ground. There were makeshift crosses that were made for the 100. Well, at the initial, it was 99. The 100th person passed away at the end of May of 2003. So there were these makeshift crosses, just stuff. People would come, teddy bears, just all kinds of things, alcohol, coffee cups. And it was just, it made it more tragic looking. And so for years, there had been a group trying to acquire the land. It wasn't quite working for them. They were the victims' family members, and they didn't allow at that time survivors to be on their board because we were really separate. There were the survivor families and victim families, and they didn't want to be near us at all. It took a long time. But something happened on that board in 2010, and several people left. So myself and another friend approached them and said, look, we've raised this much money for the Station Family Fund, which was a fund that helped people live on a daily basis. Let us help you. Our survivor story is raising money. Let us help you. Took them a little bit of time, and thankfully they let us on the board, and we struggled a little bit. I didn't know I had it in me, but every time someone was talking not so nice about what we were doing or how we were going to acquire the land, I was just like I have a pit bull. I was like a pit bull because I'm like, no, that we're not stealing the land from anybody. We're not taking it by eminent domain. And eventually the owner of the land heard me on a radio talk show. And within 3 days, he signed the land over to us. And he said, I'm only doing this because I have followed you. I have followed your story. I've heard what you've done. I would have never trusted anybody else. And he gave us a time frame. We had to finish it within 10 years to build a memorial. If not, we had to give it back to him and he would build one. Thankfully we got it accomplished, but it was an effort on so many people's part. Our local construction teams, union halls, just everybody. I couldn't have done it. The fundraising, we raised $2 million with the help of a professional fundraiser. Because my story can sell, but not that much. So we were very fortunate. And the donations just came from everywhere. We were really fortunate. And in the end, on May 21st of 2017, we built this incredible park. And as tragic as that night was, if you walk on that property today, it's pure peace. You don't feel that bad energy. And some, I don't know, people don't believe in that kind of stuff, but there's truly a difference when you walk on that property today. It's just so peaceful and it's beautiful. And so my mission is to make sure it stays that way. I'm there constantly making sure it's clean. I clean if there's dead flowers, balloons, whatever, I clean it all up. We work too hard. And so for as long as I'm standing, that'll always be my place.
I love that. Well, one of my questions was how, you honor those lives lost. And that sounds like the memorial is just, I'm sure, one of those ways. Are there other ways that you like to remember those, like Fred, after the accident happened?
Yes. I am so vocal about them. And I think that's part of why I don't have PTSD. This tragic thing happened and we've lost some incredible people. And I've learned so much about the 100 over 20 years. Man, like the world is a sadder place because they're not here. They were just fun and good people. We'll never understand the why. So I am pretty vocal about remembering them. This week, I've done a lot of interviews, and it's just, I tell people, please never forget them. Just always, we call them our 100 angels, and keep them in your mind. Remember that 100 people lost their lives, and a lot of it was because of stupidity and money, and but it's important for me that no one forgets them.
Yeah. And you talked about, doing those interviews and sharing your story. And Gina and Amy, I know you're both advocates. So what do you both hope to get from sharing your story? Amy, I know yours isn't, related to the Station Club Fire, but what do you hope to get from sharing your story?
Yeah, I think it is change, positive change and awareness. So sharing the story just to share it doesn't, give me meaning, but sharing it with a purpose, whether it's acceptance and inclusion of those that look a little different, or if it is around the needless loss of fire, because we value profit over human life. We know that if we put sprinklers in new homes, that people could get out and live, and when there's a house fire. So every time I see a new development going up and there aren't sprinklers in it because we're not willing to spend $1 or something a square foot, that's really frustrating. And so it keeps me passionate about it and energized to share the stories of this community and my own.
I think that's paramount. Like, we just can't stop. In Rhode Island, there are always somebody in this little state going before our House representatives asking them to downgrade the fire codes that got put in place because of the station fire. It infuriates me. Why would you want that hanging over your head? Because you saved a couple of bucks, not putting that sprinkler system in, or the proper lighting over fire exits. There's so many things. It just blows my mind that people want that. So I am, nope, not going to happen while I'm around.
Yeah.
Well, I love that you continue to work for that prevention. And in terms of, and I guess maybe this question's for Amy, what do you believe needs to continue to be done to prevent accidents like this? I think we all know that raising awareness is a big step in the right direction, but there's more to be done, Amy, as we know. So do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's a coordinated effort, and it's one of the reasons why we really value our partnerships with people like NFPA and NFSA and Home Fire Sprinkler Co. And so there's an education component. There's a consumer awareness. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with or have worked at Phoenix that have tried to sprinkler their home, but because it's not a mandatory thing, the market isn't there, so they can't do it. So the home builders like to say, well, they can choose to have it if they want, but that's not really true. Because if there isn't a market for it, we don't have people to provide it, and they're not available to put them in on a one-off basis. But if it's a requirement and it's cheaper all around, and it's it's like having a handrail on your stairs. If it has to be there, it has to be there, and they make it work. So again, I think there's some political issues here around that. It's a long road. I have always said fire and burn prevention, as far as codes and standards, is a long game, not a short game. The fire sprinklers, we did some work on fire safe cigarettes, which had some impact, and so there's a long process here, and it takes united voices to have it happen, and trying to find those coalitions of people that can get behind issues, and the community seems to be very excited to get involved. We put out action alerts around, they're trying to take arc fault circuit interrupters out of the building code because it's going to save them $700 a house. So those are things that we have to add our voice to as a community, I think, and it gives me purpose, and I think it does others to do that. So if we can be a convener and connector for people to add their voice to these issues, that's what we can bring. I think this community can bring the why, and the fire prevention experts can tell us how to do it the best way, but we can say why it's so important.
Definitely. And I mean, I think we can all agree that sometimes it's easy to think, well, I'm invincible. It's not going to happen to me. And that's why we do encourage survivors to share their story, whether you are going to your House of Representatives and standing in front of them, or if it's just sharing your story online. We share the story for a lot of reasons, but one of them is certainly advocacy, to show this can happen, and it does happen. And just because you may think it's not going to happen to you doesn't make you against it ever happening.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other piece that Gina brought up that I want to highlight here is, she talked about a positive recovery, part of it because she got connected early and saw that there was hope up there, right? There's others that have gone through this. So we have a long road to hoe yet to get people connected to these community-based services from the acute phase into home. And that's, as you guys both know, Phoenix Society is really zeroing in on that juncture between hospital and home. And how can we get people connected earlier to this community, working with our hospital partners, because they don't have to do it all by themselves either. And there's a lot of new resources out here in the burn community that we're trying to connect people to again earlier, because I think we hear at World Burn Congress so many times people show up 20 years later ever having struggled for a very long time.
We get questions a lot from survivors, right? How can I stay involved? How can I get involved? I think it's really important that we highlight, Phoenix Society does regularly send out those action alerts like Amy mentioned. So whether you're in Rhode Island, or I know there's regular, across the country really. So continuing to, visit Phoenix Society's website and subscribing to those emails. I know it sounds like we're pulling out that marketing pitch, but it's true. If you want to stay connected and learn how you can continue to advocate, sometimes it's as simple as signing up, right, to lend your voice. So I think that's really important to highlight of like how it can be done, because sometimes we're like, yeah, I want to do it, but how can I lend my voice to that action? So.
Yeah, we have a new one that we'll be pushing out soon, right, Rachel? Around we're trying to promote more dollars towards burn research and long-term outcomes. So that'll be coming in the next few weeks. We'll need voices try to allocate some resources to this community, which I think is underserved. So there's lots of ways that people can get involved, and we'd love to have you.
And go ahead, Gina. Sorry.
I think it's so important that from that hospital phase, even if the person isn't ready at that time, hand them a brochure or something that says, don't lose this when you're ready. It really will change your world. And that's my local hospital. The therapists and people there have been so good about it. I get calls weekly. Do you mind talking to this person? They're not ready for an in-person visit, but they, would love to just chat and then maybe go from there. It's so important to get them to hear about it right in that critical phase.
I want to actually take it back here just a moment too, because I know when you shared your story, I didn't know about you losing your hair completely until a chat just recently. And one of our peer support chats focused all about wigs. And Gina educated me to the 9th degree about the different types of wigs and how she, and it was so impactful for me because that is something that not only are you working with the image of your scars, but, you've lost part of your identity with your hair. And so in terms of like accepting your scars, how did you make peace with that? I know you shared some really powerful sentiments in that chat that night of like, sometimes I don't wear my wig if I don't want to. And you're not today, which, but can we spend a minute to just talk about what that's like, right? Of how you overcame. I know it took me a while to just show my scars in general, but I think it would be much harder if I didn't have this lock of hair to be able to kind of overcome that. So I'd love if you just spend a moment and tell us a little bit about not just your hair, right, but your scars in general.
Sure. The hair was right up there with losing the ear and not wearing earrings again. I loved cutting my hair, letting it grow out, cutting it, then I'd color it. It was purple, blue. I walk in my hairdresser, thank God she's my cousin. She didn't kick me out, but she'd be like, oh God, what do you want? So losing my hair was, it was big. When my head, it took about a year for the wounds on my head to heal. So I couldn't wear anything other than, mostly there were gauze on my head. But if I had to go somewhere, I put a cap on. It was awful. The staring, the looks that people would give you, it's soul crushing because you feel so bad that you think you're hurting them, but inside, you're dying. My first time trying on wigs was god awful. We went to there's a local salon here in Cranston, and they've got beautiful stuff, beautiful wigs. They're beautiful salon. 35 years old, I wasn't wearing a wig, like, oh my God, but I didn't have an option. So I remember trying to try them on to the person I looked like before. I wanted that same haircut, that same style. And my cousin, the hairdresser, said, you need to stop. Let's try something so crazy on you that. And so we did little by little. I found the okay color, the okay length. But they were so uncomfortable. It's had all the netting inside. And some people are fortunate where they'll have enough hair where you can connect the combs to it or something under the wig. I had nothing. So there was tape constantly on my head. Then it would rip the skin. It was awful. I don't remember who exactly it was that told me about these prosthetic wigs. That might have been around 2005 or 6. And then, okay, let me investigate that. Well, boy, oh boy, yeah, they're beautiful, but they're not cheap. They are not. Mine, because of the length that I get, are about $5,000. But in 20 years, I've only ordered 3 of them. They last so long. And if you're really good about taking care of them, my oldest one is about 10 years old now. And people have no clue that it's a wig. It's made out of silicone on the inside. It's quite a process to be made. And then it just vacuum seals to my head. I mean, I drive a convertible. It doesn't move. But I'm also being like, I wouldn't go in the water with it. I don't sleep with it at night. So it stays looking good. But it's an adjustment.
What you shared was it's not covered by insurance, which I had no idea, which as someone that, you'd think that's, a natural part of kind of your injury is looking for the ways to kind of recover after. And I know you had shared that with the group of like, if you have cancer and you need a wig, it's something that's covered, but it's not with, and that really, impacted me because I was, that as a survivor, that can be tough, but it's a part of sometimes you just want to wear it.
Yes. Well, and it's so hard because when I tell people about it, listen, I couldn't afford my first one. Someone helped me raise the money for it, but it makes me feel so much better. So it's worth the money. I've had hairdressers come up to me and say, wow, what a pretty cut, what a pretty color. And oh, thanks. It's a wig. What? But it is, I don't know why it's not covered by insurance. It's prosthetic. Doctors have written notes and letters to the insurance companies.
Another case for some advocacy there. I think sometimes doctors' letters aren't as public as the advocacy that the insurance company might have. I think that is part of the challenge in burns is understanding these long-term needs on a bigger scale, so we can have the data to then go say, hey, this is that cancer can have it, but burns can't. What's that about? So I think those are things, pressure garments are another one, trying to understand, there's great groups raising money to pay to have them donated, but why should they have to do that? So, but getting the data to show that problem, we haven't gotten there yet in burns. It's still very focused on the acute when they're still in the hospital getting paid, right? So we have some work to do, but I think this community, again, with the stories and understanding, and as we get better about collecting information and data around those challenges, I think we can hopefully have some impact there. But
Gina, when you shared that with me, I was stunned, right? And I would have no idea because it's not something I've had to deal with directly, but it's things like that you don't even think of overcoming. But you do have your prosthetic wigs, but you also wear your head scarves, and I know you mentioned having different colors and types. How do you choose, right? Like how do you decide what you want to wear that day and go into it?
I've got one that matches everything. My mother's like, how do you do that? I've got a whole bunch of colors and my shirts match those. I really that's how I built my world. I'm so comfortable like this. My grandchildren, there's a total of 9 of them. And
wow!
Every single one of them has gone through the phase of, why are you wearing that wig? Like, take that off. My 3-year-old grandson just did it at Christmas time. I went to my sister's and felt like getting dressed up. I walked in the door and he looked at me and said, take that off. I said, well, I can't. I said, I don't have my hat with me. I'll go get mine. Oh, I'm not wearing a hat, but thank you. It's okay. Like, first time going out with the cap or it's a little uncomfortable, but then you think about the big scheme of life. I could have died, I might not be walking into that store or the wherever. But I love funky colors. This one's kind of boring. But I have some really bright ones.
It's got some nice grays to match it today.
Yeah. You know, it's just, I guess it's all perspective. You have to look at the big picture. You know,
I love that you said that, right? Yeah. Of like, we all have things that we deal with. And sometimes you're like, why am I, but I'm here, right? I'm here to tell the story. And that can be I think it took me a lot of time to like finally get to that place, but it takes time for sure.
It does. It does. I tell everybody that I meet, it's patience. Dig deep for the patience, because this is not, they discharged you from the hospital and you're all better.
Right.
It's
almost a roller coaster.
Yeah. That hospital, you walk out of that hospital and you're like, oh my God, I'm going back in, because you're safe. You're safe. You feel so safe. Everybody that I've talked with through the SOUL program, and I just say, just patience. Don't rush this. Listen to the doctors, listen to your therapist. It'll happen over time. You'll get there.
And it's hard to do. I don't always want to listen to what they say because I don't like it, right?
Well, of course. Yeah, of course. They told me I probably wouldn't drive again. They didn't think I'd have use of my hands, which that would have really been really bad because I'm Italian and we use our hands. There's so many things that the doctors said, you might not.
Yeah.
And when I go home and I'm going to do double time on physical therapy because I'm doing that. I came home from the hospital in June and they're like, oh, don't even think about driving. You don't have control of this or that. And I think October, I got behind the wheel of a car and started driving around the neighborhood. And one of my fellow survivors ratted me out to the surgeons. I was like, oh, man. He said, I was just jealous. How? Because he couldn't drive. And he was waiting for his prosthetic arm to come. He's like, that's not fair. And I'm like, oh, you'd have to rat me out, you know? But every time those doctors told me, no, we don't think so, that wasn't going to happen. And I had 2 little boys to raise. They had to see that their mom, we were going to survive this.
That's beautiful.
Gina, do you when you were talking about your kids, it made me think of my kids, and they were born after my burn injury. But how did you? Because they're just such wonderful boys, and how do you think this impacted them in a way that they wouldn't be who they were without this? Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And their compassion and their acceptance. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think right from the start. So I'm nuts. I was a patient at Shriners Children's Hospital in Boston because the other hospitals had run out of room. So it was very unique. There were 4 adults in this children's hospital. On the weekends when my sons would come and visit, they got bored. They were little. They were 6 and 9. They don't want to hang out, in this sick room. And so social workers, nurses, people would come along and take them to play in the playroom. And there were other burn children there. Yeah. They were just kids. They were playing. They never even. I was so scared when I was adjusting to life, and when I was home, and I thought, oh my God, I don't want them to see my head and the scars. And one time they did, and my son looked at me and goes, why are you nervous? Now he was the older one, so he was 9. He's like, Mom, it's okay. It's still you. And it's like, man, they don't see that. Mm-hmm. And Shriners definitely helped with that. I give them a lot of credit. Yeah. They were also 2 little boys that would go back to their elementary school every Monday and report to their classroom how Mom was doing. Mm-hmm. My son, Nicholas, the youngest, while he was dealing with me, he was in 1st grade. He had a little friend. Her name was Allison, and she had a brain tumor. And she had it since kindergarten. But she was okay. She was, chugging along. What I didn't know is while I was sick, she was getting sicker. And so one of his visits to the hospital, my dad was with him, and he said, Nick's got something to tell you. And he told me that Allison had passed. From the minute Nick met Allison, he was already compassionate. He was that little boy in elementary school. Let me help you with your coat. He was just there was something in Nick. Yeah. Alex is the oldest, and he's the protector. He's like, oh no, don't go there. That's my mom. they just grew up in this world. They didn't really have a choice.
Right.
They were around other burn survivors. They were around my survivor friends from the fire, whether they were injured or not. It just taught them so much. So when they were in school and someone had a disability, whatever it was, my sons didn't see it, but they taught their friends that too. They've got a great group of friends. And I don't know if it was because they were little reporters back in elementary school, but yeah, they've got a great group of friends that, they're pretty good guys and all compassionate. And so it definitely took a village. It took a village, the teachers, my family, but my boys grew up to be incredible men, and that's all I could ask for.
Gina, you talk a lot about other folks that were in the fire, right? It sounds like you've stayed relatively close. Do you want to talk about a little bit about kind of the other burn survivors that you've connected with, since I'm sure there's a lot of people that at the time of the accident you didn't know, but you're very close with now.
Yeah, I didn't really know anybody. I honestly, Fred, I knew him that night because he was my boyfriend. But yeah, later on, I started talking to people and mostly over the phone because I was still so injured and couldn't go out. But slowly these friendships formed. Some have withstood the test of time. Others, I think, ran their course and everybody went their separate ways, which that's life in any situation. But I am so incredibly grateful for the friendships that I have formed. I have two guy friends. One is my friend Donovan Williams, and he's a survivor, and he's been to one, maybe two World burns. He's just such a character, but he lost his eyesight. He's a graphic designer that didn't stop him. He went back to work. He had 3 kids to raise, and that's what he said. I got to go to work. I've got 3 kids to raise. He is a brother. And when I met my husband, I had to tell him about Donovan. And I said, listen, you got to like him. You got to love him. You're going to go before he does. And then the other gentleman, his name is Jody King. His brother, Tracy King, died in the fire. He's one of the angels. We had such a connection because his brother Tracy was my first kiss. And so when I met him through all of this, Jody was not there that night. He told me who he was, and I'm like, oh my God, your brother was my first kiss. And that just solidified a relationship and then said to my husband, he's not going anywhere. And there's some women, we're just so connected, and I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't. This awful thing happened, but I'm so glad to have these people in my life. I can't imagine them not being there. But it definitely, Amy, at World Burn in 2004, I remember meeting with a psychiatrist in that room, and she told us what we had, this connection could be kind of tragic or not so healthy. She was right. She was right. At the time, though, we were like, oh, we're leaving. You're crazy. Yeah. But she was right, because there were some that just were not healthy. And I have eliminated a lot of people. Their stories of how they've chosen to live, it's just not for me. I want to live a positive life and remember my 100 in a positive light, and so yeah, I definitely have removed quite a few.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that for me is the growth through trauma. We all do it so differently, and whether you're burned in a single incident or in a big group like you, getting into that big room with so many different perspectives just changes it for me. When you're ready to hear it, right? Because you're so focused on your own trauma and your own loss and your own story that you may be in that room, but you're not hearing it. But when you can open up to it and say, oh, okay, I guess I got it pretty good. That was eye-opening for me. And at that time I was even working on the burn unit, but to go to my first World burn and then start to hear these different stories and then going, oh, I remember that phase. I remember when I was there. It just kind of changed the perspective for me.
I want to say my first time meeting you, Amy, was at Rhode Island Hospital. You and Barbara Quayle were there, and we were in this auditorium, and
Yeah.
I remembered you talking about being angry at your mom and your family, like, or you would have these outbursts, things. And I recognized that I was doing that same exact thing.
Yeah.
And now, so when I counsel people, I'm like, just be prepared. And if there's a family member sitting there, it's like,
Yeah.
try not to take it personally. We just go through these phases.
Yeah. You're safe with them. You know they're not going to leave you. So
So true.
you can go,
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it's that's where this group is so important, because each of us I learn something all the time. I really do.
Yeah, I so remember that time. Barbara and I think we're doing training for the hospital team on kind of social skills and image enhancement, so they could help. And again, that they would have never done that without kind of the experience and the resources and the focus that came with what happened. And they wanted to do good. They wanted to do good, and that team was amazing. So yeah, the connections that were made are long lasting. You know, having World Burn in Rhode Island twice, the fire department, and slowly getting closer to those that were impacted on that side of the equation. That's been a long road for them too. So
yeah. Our first one, I think, in Rhode Island is that when the Brazil group came, or maybe it was the second?
I think it was the second one, maybe the second one. Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, it really was. And we took them out to few of them out to the site.
Yeah.
That forged a friendship thousands of miles away, right? Another country. It's amazing what a tragic thing can bring.
Definitely.
Well, I know. Go ahead, Rachel.
Nope, we're on the same page. I know we're getting close to our time here, but we do have just a few quick final questions. So I want to first just ask you, Gina, what is your favorite part of being a peer supporter and helping others?
Just being around that person and hoping that even if they heard one word I said, and then months later we're at a burn group together, and they'll say, "Remember, you said this to me," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was good." You know, or like a year later, all of a sudden that person wants to become a peer supporter. I love doing it. We're not going to reach them all. We're not going to get them all, but it's a wonderful program, and proud to be a part of it. I really am. To be able to give back to this community and to a new burn survivor in that moment when they think life is done. And when I tell people I got married after my injuries with the women, they're like, "What? Someone was okay with that?" Yeah. Just be picky. So that's, it's the children have been fun. Meeting some, the children. One little girl now attends she has attended World Burn. She was from Nigeria where her accident happened, and I had a wig on my first time meeting her, and she wanted to see it because she was going to be bald too. I remember taking that wig off at Shriners Children's Hospital. Here it is. At one of the World Burns, the first in California, I was shocked. There she was. There was her dad. She had just got her first wig. She was so excited. And I was so proud, to see that moment. So, yeah, I do it for a lot. Those are my moments.
That's beautiful.
Well, I know our community loves you, and you have touched so many lives.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. It means a lot. Thank you.
So, Gina, as we wrap up, we do have two final questions that we ask all of the folks that are on our show. So, if you did your homework, these are coming. But the first self-care for Gina, what does that look like? And maybe you don't do enough of it. Maybe you do a lot of it. What does that look like, Gina?
I'm slowly doing that for myself. I did not in the beginning. It's probably only this last year, as the 20th year was approaching, that I decided it was my time. I, in 2015, bought a house in New Hampshire, little house. I run away there. That's what I do for self-care. No one knows me. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. They slowly learned that I was involved in this fire, but they leave me alone. They leave me alone. So that's what I do. I run away. I get my nails done. I got a great nail tech. She can make me a couple of nails because they didn't grow back. Stuff like that. Listening to music. Most of the times you'll hear music in my house, not a TV. Those are my moments.
I love that. Well, and our final question is, what do you do to celebrate your anniversary? I know obviously you share yours with so many, but do you have any special plans or any annual plans that you always do?
I've always run away for the very first few. I've always taken a trip or somewhere out of Rhode Island. But probably since the park opened and maybe just before that, I decided I would stick around. It's getting together with the burn survivors that I'm still close with Monday night. Well, the site itself, the park will be very busy on Monday. And if this weather continues, it's going to be busy here. So I'll be out there for the most part. I'll get to meet new people, see old friends. But then around 6:00, there's just a group of us that will go to this restaurant that's across the street that was instrumental the night of the fire. The fire had happened and they had just closed for the evening, but the owner of it opened it back up and it became a triage center. Wow. So this restaurant means a lot to us. We support him in everything. So we'll be there on Monday night, just before 11:00. We walk across the street to the site. And we're there. 11:07 is when the life changed. It's a quiet moment for us. A lot of tears, a lot of hugging. That's what I'll do on the 20th. On May 21st, because it's New England, I could not plan a memorial in February. Retrospective, 75 degrees keeps up. I probably should have, but didn't know that. So we'll host an official memorial on May 21st at the site. I picked May 21st because that was the date of opening the park as well.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I said to my sister and my mom today, is it okay that I'm not sad or depressed? Should I be? Am I doing something is this wrong? And my sister looked at me and said, if you told me you were sad and depressed, I'm going to be really mad at you. Because just, yes, this thing happened, but look at what you've done. And so that made me feel a little bit better.
Well, on behalf of Rachel, myself, and Phoenix Society, happy anniversary, first of all. And we thank you for lending your voice to our podcast and hopes that we can continue to help you with that change that we're looking for.
Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing for the community and these young, these girls. This is super important. So thank you for what you're doing.
We appreciate it, Gina.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Girls with Grafts. If you are enjoying this content, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.